Hello, I'm Paul Amos, founder of The Redeemed. The Redeemed is an organization, better said, a community. It is brought together of men of all types who come to us to celebrate life's victories, but also to deal with life's difficulties. We want to understand the triumphs that can come through all of this, through understanding Jesus and through having a community of men to do life with. The Redeemed Man podcast today has a very special guest, someone who's brought forth a vision into something that only those of us in Columbus, Georgia can truly understand how big of a reality it's become. Dr. Grant Scarborough is here today to talk about his faith, how his being a doctor has brought forth the ability to deliver into a difficult community, into an underserved community, his heart, his faith, and who he is. Thanks, Grant, for being here today.
Thanks, Paul, for letting me be here. This is going to be great.
I have been excited to do this for a while because while there are a lot of people whose stories overlap, yours is truly unique, maybe not in the how you've come to faith, but certainly in the how you've lived it out. And so before we get there, talk to us a minute. You know, I've known your dad, I know your brother, I know you, and I certainly know your mom. You've grown up in the true spiritual household. And so for those members of our audience that understand what it's like, maybe not to have grown up in a preacher's house, but certainly to have grown up in a truly spiritual house, how did you grow up and how did you stay within it rather than bucking to step outside of it?
Well, I think I was very blessed. So right now I'm in a service ministry where I'm serving others, and that really started with my parents. They modeled that out for me in just so many different ways of them being involved in ministries like House of Mercy. From little things like we never sold our car. We always gave it away to a needy family. And to be able to drive down the street and mom go, hey, there's our old car, which is a constant reminder that we're giving away to things in need. Wow. To take in kids' Christmas presents that were poor before Christmas and go into their houses. And my mother, who I love, I tell everybody her spiritual gifts are brownies and hugs. I can't tell how many folks she brought to Christ literally by just saying, come over, have some brownies, and I'll give you a hug. I went off to college, and I called home to check on my parents, and my friends are there. I'm like, what are you doing? They said, we came for the brownies. So she had such hospitality and such love for others that it was amazing. And my dad, he always believed in the little guy. Time and time again, there are folks that he would go visit in prison or that he would help when they got in difficult situation, and he never gave up on them. And I remember his mom saying one time that Otis would go to school, find the loneliest person, bring him home and go, hey, meet my new best friend. And so I just think I was able to see that modeled for me, them loving others that wanted me to do some of the same thing. I was able to stay, I feel like, in the faith. Truly, I want to say it's testament to my brother. Everybody assumed I was going to be a good kid because my brother lived it. And so I had this blessing of an older brother that was such a good example that I just was able to follow in his footsteps. And it made it a little easier for me to do that. We ended up going, I went my plan, we ended up going to the same college. And so he just continued to be there, encouraging me. And I think that was really what helped me make it through that time. So great family, very blessed. I tell folks all the time that there's so many folks who want to be the first commandment Christian. Like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Like, we love to stop there, and it's great. But we can do that in our house. The second commandment is love others, which means we have to open the door, walk outside, and get messy. And I just saw my parents do that. They loved others, whether they're my friends or folks living in poverty or folks who need a second chance. And I think because they modeled that, I was able for me to kind of follow that.
To our listeners, Bart Scarborough his older brother, was on the show before talking about Ancient Way Farm and the ministry that he runs. So your parents had two children who are running incredible ministries, who've been your brother a big part of Young Life and now doing Ancient Way, you doing MercyMed. Amazing. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but as I went through one of the darkest periods of my life, your dad called me and he said, let's go to breakfast, which you don't turn down Otis's invitation to breakfast. And I went and he said, I want to do Bible study with you. And I said, really? And he said, yes. He gave me a book and he said, for 30 days, we're going to every day communicate with each other via text. And we're going to talk about what this means and journey. And it was clear he'd done it 100 times, yet he was willing to invest in me
Right.
at a period when I really needed it. And so for 30 days, I still have all those texts, and I still reach back out to your dad and tell him how much that means to me. But it's so interesting how
Yeah.
you say that about your dad coming home from school and talking about that, and yet he still picks up those lost souls sometimes when they need it most.
He does. He's 79, about to be 80. I think a year and a half ago, he made his goal. He wanted to encourage one person a day.
Did he really?
And it just might be something, just a simple text, a phone call, but that was his goal. And every day I see him, like, all of a sudden I see him turn around and go, hey, by the way, that was really good. Like, he would just turn and be very intentional and say something to someone and then go, and he'll look at me and goes, that's one a day. And then, it's just his little thing. And so I love kind of being able to see that. I mean, both him and my mother. Another great story I love about my dad is that when I was young, he tried to memorize the entire book of James.
Wow.
And he would walk around in his white boxers and white little undershirt and socks on, quoting James out loud, so much so that I still know probably the first 8 to 10 verses of James because he walked around the house and just quoted over and over again.
What
And
an
so
example that set.
it's been a great example. And to be able to look back at that, it is encouragement for me and my brother. Now, my brother, let's be honest, right? He runs this nonprofit where he tries to get everybody to slow down and be still and put your phone away. And I run this nonprofit where I'm working nonstop all day. And so kind of the joke is that he says, I need to slow down a little bit. And I'm like, hey, you need to pick it up a little bit. So, there's a little bit of excitement between the two of us.
That's interesting. Well, let's dive into that because, when I think about the path that most people go on that are doctors, it is not the path that you've chosen. I mean,
Right.
in many ways, they're going out, focused on building a practice and building things that are about developing business for themselves or their practice abroad. You, on the other hand, are trying to find a way to save souls and using medicine to get you there.
Mhm.
Tell us about MercyMed, its origins, and a little bit about what makes it so special.
It was never my plan. I will tell you that I had no desire to be a doctor. Some days I'm not sure if I still do. No, I still want to be a doctor because I've learned that God can see things down the future that I cannot see. I was in ministry. I was doing staff for Young Life. I was working with a church. I was going to some impoverished areas in Atlanta and really loved working with those who had very little. And Proverbs says, an abundance of counselors, there's victory. So I went and sat with an older person and said, hey, this is my skill set. This is what I like. These are my dreams. How do you see this living out? And he said, I could see you being a doctor for the poor. And I looked at him and I said, that's why scripture says an abundance of counselors, there's victory, because I don't like your counsel. I'm going to talk to someone else. And I went to talk to someone else. And before I started speaking, he said, I know we're here to talk about your future. And I've been praying. And I felt the Lord put on my heart, I need to tell you, I think you need to go to med school. And I said, I don't want to go to med school. And a few weeks later, I got a letter from one of my dad's friends who I've never got another letter from ever before or since that said, I've been praying about you. And I felt like I need to write you and tell you ought to go to med school. So I went to med school begrudgingly. I did not have a desire to go. In fact, I wasn't sure if it was the right path. But I said, Lord, I'm going to apply to med school, but I'm sure that's not what you want me to do. And so I really think I was one of the few people to get accepted to med school and be like, dadgummit, I've got to actually go to med school now. So I knew when I went to med school, I didn't want to be a regular doctor. And that time I was trying to say, Lord, do you want me to go overseas? Like, I don't know kind of how to do that. And one of the biggest encouragements, I think, was my brother-in-law while I was in med school. He was reading through the book of Leviticus. And he called me up one day and he said, Grant, do you know who the first doctors in Scripture are? And I said, no idea. And he says, it's in Leviticus, and it's the priest. If you show up and have a white spot on your skin, you go to the priest, and the priest will evaluate it. If it looks a certain way, you go to the house and stay there for a week. You come back the next. It's a perfect protocol. And he said, Grant, the people that God put in charge of physical bodies of Israel, he first put in charge of their spiritual bodies. He said, you have a priestly duty. And that just rung so true to my heart because I want to be a minister. Like I wanted to minister to people. I wanted to share my faith. And to hear that I had a priestly duty to care for their physical bodies, but also their spiritual souls is amazing. And I go in 20 rooms a day now and sit down one-on-one with people. And they'll tell me things they've never told anybody. And I get to handle that as a priest and pray with them and encourage them and be beside them. So the Lord could see, I couldn't see that. I didn't want to go to med school, but the Lord could say, hey, you love ministry. This is a great way to kind of do ministry through the gift of medicine. So that was at Mercy University in Macon. And my mentor in Macon told me that his friend went to Memphis and started a clinic for the poor in Memphis. So I moved to Memphis to do my training to see the clinic they did. When I moved to Memphis, the county south was the second poorest in the U.S. So it was lots of impoverished people living in Memphis. It still is. And that's where I kind of did my training before kind of trying to start a clinic. So that's kind of the long story.
So you go to Memphis, you
Yeah.
see this, and I take it just feels like a calling when you get there.
I do. It's really neat. I met another person the day I showed up to interview who had the same desire as I did. And so he was finishing his program. I was starting my program. He moved to Augusta, Georgia, and we just kept in contact. And after a couple of years, I said, "Listen, when I get done, we're gonna start a clinic for the poor in Augusta." So we moved there in 2007. From 2007 to 2011, we built this clinic up. That's still there. It's great. But during that time period, I was kind of sensing the Lord was saying, "I want you to do it again." But I just be honest with you, I wasn't sure and wasn't clear, and I kind of prayed, said, "Lord, I can't leave my friend here by himself. So if you want me to move on, bring another doctor." And a week later, another doctor showed up, and we hired him, and I forgot about it. And so about 6 months later, I felt it again. I said, "Lord, if you want me to move on, you bring someone to offer me a job. I'm not going to look." And about 3 days later, I got an email from a friend going, "Hey, I got a job opportunity I think you might like." And I think that was what released me from that clinic to say, "Okay, Lord, I think you're telling me it's okay to move on." And that's when I kind of started searching and looking, and it wasn't my plan to move to Columbus, but the Lord just really opened some beautiful doors to come back here and start another clinic in Columbus.
So for some people, moving home
Right.
is an easy decision. For others, it is the decision you really shy away from. Where along that spectrum was it for you to come back to Columbus, and was this the place that God just told you to come?
I'm pretty sure every place I told the Lord I was never going back to again, I ended up there. I mean, every place I said, "All right, Lord, I'll go anywhere you want to," but I do not want to go to Atlanta, Georgia to work next to where my brother was because I followed him. I went someplace different. And man, I cannot tell you how much the Lord opened the door for me to move to Atlanta. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going there. So in my heart, I probably want to be in a bigger city. Like I really want to be in Atlanta, Chicago, New York. Like I like kind of that. But the Lord just opened these doors here, and I just felt the call of coming back here. And to start, I've done talks on starting clinics before, and I tell folks all the time, if you want to start a clinic for the poor, you have to have really one thing, and that's a physician willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen, because they don't get paid very much to do it. You have to take less money so you can care for more people living in the poor. But coming back to Columbus, I now give another point, which I used to not give, and that is a community that wants it. And so for me to come back to Columbus and have about 6 or 7 folks who really want it, who say, "Grant, you go love the poor and be a doctor. We'll help the first year or two with fundraising, with this, with that. We'll set you up to succeed." To have that community here that we had in Columbus to set me up to succeed was incredible. It was incredible. In Augusta, like we were pulling together on a shoestring in Augusta. And, someone actually, in fact, one of my patients told me the other day, he says something like, real life begins on the other side of being comfortable. And I really like that because you really do see God move once you get uncomfortable and go, "All right, Lord, I'm going to do this for you, but I'm a little bit nervous, like, will it work or not?" You really got to show up. In Augusta, we felt that. Like someone gave us a building. It was incredible. But then we had to pay $10,000 on that building for insurance and some other issues. And we didn't have a penny. And 2 days before it was due, someone showed up and gave us a check for $10,000. And we're like, "Oh, thank you, Lord." But that's where faith is. Like when you get uncomfortable, you give God a chance to move. And I feel like so often we don't see God move because we're just too comfortable. Like he didn't have to move. He didn't have to show up because we're not stepping out in faith saying, "All right, Lord, I'm going to step out and see what happens. And I really need you to show up because if not, it's not going to be a good thing." And so the beauty of coming to Columbus, maybe not now that I say all that, is that there's a community already wrapping their hands around this whole idea going, we want to help make that happen. And that was a great thing about coming home and getting this clinic up and going.
Having spent 15 years of my life in the insurance business and for all practical purposes, most of my life around it, the insurance world has become a crazy place, and making money in the medical world has become an interesting game. And yet you're playing everything totally different than everybody else. I mean, you talked about what it took to get it off the ground and the beauty of being surrounded by people who are willing to support you. But you've been doing this now for 13 years, and you've created a sustainable model, which obviously fundraising is a part of. But you're also doing things that, are much broader than what you originally expected. I mean, when I came down to visit you at your clinic, I mean, what you talked about, you originally offered as services versus all the people who've stepped in and volunteered, all the things you have now, it's gotten so broad. I mean, how did it go from the early beginnings to where it is today? And where has God placed that vision of where it's going in the future?
So initially it started off with just myself, a person working up front, and a nurse, a staff of 2, and a great volunteer. I mean, there's 4 of us. And when people find out there's a clinic that will see you, it's not a free clinic. We want folks to invest in your health care. And we started, I think it was about $20 a visit. And they'll get to come in and see me, a licensed doctor, and their blood work. One of our hospitals were doing it all for free. It was a great deal. So we've never advertised. We never did anything. I mean, it just, when the word got out, we were busy. But going back, anytime you do something with Jesus, like, I just think there's going to be pushback from Satan. Like, he does not want us to advance the kingdom of God. And anything he can do to slow it down, Satan, he wants to do that. And, here I am trying to, I don't want to make it sound too much, to get my life away from this dream. And in the first 2 months, we had someone steal money from us.
Oh, really?
A lot of money from us as we're fundraising. And I remember going to my biggest donor and going, let me tell you what happened. I don't know what to do. And he said, Grant, what did you expect? You're trying to start something for the name of Christ. Get used to things like this. Wow. And I got to tell you, that was such an encouragement for me to realize we're in a spiritual battle. I need to open my eyes and know that. An encouragement that the community around me is for me, even when things don't go the way I want them to go. And to me, that was such a blessing to have that guy come beside me and put his arm around me and tell me it's going to be all right. Yeah. And then, our mission statement says we exist to proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord and demonstrate his love. I tell folks all the time, you could put a period right there. It would be the mission statement of every single believer. We exist not for ourselves, not to build our own kingdom, not to make our name great, but to proclaim Jesus and demonstrate his love. And the way we do that is with the gifts we have, by providing affordable quality health care to the physical, emotional, spiritual needs of the underserved. And starting in 2012 versus now, I never would have dreamed I was where I am today. And for the most part, most of that growth was folks who loved Jesus that came to me and said, I love Jesus, I love the poor, and I want to use my skill set to bless others. So my physical therapist, who's great, called me, was in the military, getting out of the military, and said, Grant, I really want to love the poor. I love Jesus, and I love physical therapy. And I said, we'll make a space for that. We'll create something for that. And sometimes it gets burst out to what our patients need. And so a lot of our patients said, we need dental care. And so at that time, we kind of ran some numbers, looked at the costs, and then started looking for a dentist. And we found a dentist that said, I love Jesus, I love the poor, and I love doing dentistry. And we said, we got a spot built out for you. Come on, let's get to work. And she was fresh out of dental school. And about 2 or 3 months in, I said, did you have any idea what you're getting yourself into? She had no idea. Like, she pulled more teeth in the first 2 months than she did her entire dental program. I mean, it was so much teeth pulling. It was crazy. So kind of the growth has come a little bit natural of people coming saying, I want to use my skill set, versus us talking to patients saying, have you ever thought about adding this service? This could be a blessing. So we just started pharmacy about 6 months ago. And that's because, the patients were asking for that. If you're taking an Uber or a bus or a taxi or a friend to get to the doctor, to have to figure out how to get to a pharmacy after that sometimes can be difficult. And so we felt like it'd be great to bring that service to them. And so now they can see us, walk down the hall, and see a pharmacist. We're not great at making money. So like our prices, even for pharmacy, it pretty much beats Walmart as well. So Even they're looking at us going, hey, this is the best deal in town, and it's on the same spot as I'm being seen. So we're trying to just break down every barrier we can to every patient to say, hey, here's a service you need. You know, you come in, you have medicine, you have dental, you have counseling. We have an urban farm, trying to teach folks to eat healthy, trying to teach folks to move. We have physical therapy, a dietitian, and we just started pharmacy, like I said, about 6 months ago.
Wow.
So,
I mean, that is truly almost fully comprehensive in what all you're bringing to the table. And, you know, I want to get back to the farm in a few minutes because I've
Sure.
been there, and that is just truly amazing because it touches everybody. And as my friends used to kid, everybody's got to eat. You know, I mean, everybody
3 times a day.
That's
3
right.
times a day. It's my favorite thing.
You know, when we're kids, we go to the doctor, and everybody's a little scared because they don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But throughout most people's lifetime, or at least the fortunate people here in the United States, they experience healthcare enough that the fear of that begins to dissipate somewhat. But in the community that you're serving, a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to have the level of healthcare, and certainly probably deal with conditions and other things from the lifestyle they've led, from the things that they've been exposed to. How have you helped people overcome those fears? And then how have you used Jesus to kind of embrace them holistically into the experience?
So there's a lot of thought that goes into that, even structurally. Like we have a fair amount of color on our walls when you walk into the waiting room. I don't want a white, sterile building. I want them to feel loved and cared for from the moment they actually walk into the building. So many of my friends that I take care of that I love so much, they've experienced what I would call micro, M-I-C-R-O trauma, just all their life, whether from frequent changing of houses to hearing the police cars to hearing fire shots. They're just a lot of trauma. And so we have to be aware of that as well. So we have to train our front desk just to not respond sometimes the way we might want to respond. They might be responding out of trauma, but we want to respond out of love as much as we can. Even when you go back into the back office, like we have these drop-down lightings that do not look like a doctor's office at all, intentionally to try to take some of that stereotype away. But you can only do so much through pretty pictures on the wall. There are a couple of things. One, and I heard said this in Young Life years ago, meet someone as if you'll know them the rest of your life. And so my goal when I go into the room is not to sit there and say, hey, how's your blood pressure? My goal is to walk in and talk to them like we're friends, like you and I are doing right now, you know?
Yeah.
My first question doesn't need to be about their blood pressure. It needs to be about their children or, they enjoy the snow day. And I think it builds friendship. I really do. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone into a room, and I think of this one lady who I love, a passed away recently, African-American lady. I walked in and she looked at me at my opener. She goes, Doctor, how's your daughter doing? I got 4. And I'm going in my brain going, which daughter, you know? And I finally realized that she was talking about my youngest. And I said she was doing good. And she said, the last time I saw you, you said you were worried about her. And I want you to know, I've been praying for her every day. Wow. Like that doesn't happen if I'm just a doctor. That happens if I meet someone as if I'm going to know them the rest of their life. I'm actually wearing a pair of shoes right now that a patient gave me. We were sitting there one day talking about shoes and laughing, and I come back the next day and she brought me a pair of shoes. I'm like, what? You don't need to be giving me a gift. I mean, and I called her on the phone and talked to her, and she goes, Doctor, you've blessed me so much. I just want to bless you back. And I thought these shoes would be nice. I mean, it was crazy. I couldn't believe it, the kindness. Wow. And so I think if you go in and meet folks as if you'll know them the rest of your life, you would treat them differently. There's a book called When Helping Hurts that says, until you realize you're just as broken as the person you're trying to help, you'll never be of much value. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I'm not going in trying to save anybody. That's not my job. That's Jesus' job. I'm going in my own brokenness, knowing they have brokenness, and we're going to sit in there together and love each other. Sometimes I pray for patients, and sometimes those patients pray for me. And that's the give and take that you have. The other phrase we like to use, and this is our lady in the health and wellness program that runs our classes, and she said a long time ago that we must outlast people's mistrust. And I think of this one a lot too, because there are a lot of folks that go into poor communities and start something, but they kind of give out after time. And so our goal has been, we want to outlast people's, they might mistrust us, But after 2, 3, 4, 5, if it's a decade, 10 years, and we're still there loving on their grandmother, loving on their kids, eventually we're going to be able to break down that mistrust, and they're going to be able to come in and know that we're going to love them and care for them.
So does that mean the growth in desire is actually exponentially growing? The need, I mean, you're obviously serving part of the community, but if that's breaking down that barrier to entry, are you seeing it pick up in terms of people's receptiveness to it?
Receptiveness in what of just coming to be seen, or
Yes,
receptiveness
yeah.
to our conversation?
Both. I mean,
Yeah.
are people now, because they know you're going to be there and they don't see you as fly by night, are they more willing to step through the door and hear what you have to say and be seen?
I think, I think being present and being there and not judging. I mean, I see all kinds of folks, all kinds of different histories, um, and just like people view themselves in a certain way. I have some folks who might be prostitutes, and they don't do prostitution for money; they do it for drugs, and so they might view themselves a certain way. But when they walk through that door, my view of them is they're made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
So they might not be willing to fight for them. We've got to be willing to fight for them. We might be willing to stand up and say, we'll help, we'll fight, we'll overcome for you. Like some of my friends don't even know the right questions to ask. And that's okay. Like we'll tell you what they are and we'll help you. Like we'll walk you through that. And so we've definitely seen a uptake in a lot of different areas. I had a crazy week a couple of weeks. I wish I could remember all these little instances because it kind of gives you a feel for what's happening. But I remember walking in a room and there was a lady here illegally into this country diagnosed with breast cancer. We got a mammogram. She's young. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And there's a surgeon in town that I called up, and he did the surgery for her. He's the hero in the story. And then John B. Amos Cancer Center is letting her make little payments along the way so she can get her chemotherapy. Like they're the hero of the story. But she's gonna be cancer free because of that.
Wow.
And she has no insurance. I mean, what a blessing. And that's the community aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the surgeon and the cancer treatment therapy, all that coming together. And the next day I'm out, with one of our patients that isn't mentally there in the middle of the street, lays down in the middle of the street, and I'm trying to serve papers on her to get legal guardianship to the state so that she won't die in the middle of the street. And then the next day I go and see a guy who's got dementia living by himself with no one to look at. I mean, it's just a roller coaster of things that you see. And so,
First of all, what you do is so admirable. I am amazed, and having seen it firsthand, I can't communicate to our audience enough about the impact you're having, but you clearly are leading with a posture that is Christ-like in your openness, your friendliness, your desire for relationship. But that still doesn't always lead people to being receptive to God. How do you lead that conversation in a medical world? And what do you do to consistently help them in their journey, not just medically, but spiritually?
I just be honest. Sometimes I do it better than other times. And sometimes I look at my schedule and I think there's so many people on the schedule. I just gotta go. So I don't know if I figured that out perfectly either, but in my opinion, I tell folks a lot, like this body of yours is great. And we want to take as good as care as we can for the next 70, 80 years. But there's a great physician and you have eternal soul that we got to pay attention to that as well. And I think everybody wants to be that guy that does that speech and someone immediately accepts Jesus. But the reality, I heard a sermon recently that said, the reality, it takes, 5,000 little touches of Jesus before someone might turn their life over to Christ. Oh. And so in that way, it humbles me to realize I don't have to do everything, but I just make little touches along the way and just let God do the rest. I had a lady come through the other day. It was a credible story. And she wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. And she said, doctor, I said I was going to read the Bible this year. And halfway through the year, I realized I'm not living right. And so I said, I'm getting out of that relationship. I'm stopped doing that. And I've never felt so good.
Wow.
She was, my anxiety's gone. I feel at peace. I love Jesus and I can't stop reading the Bible. Like, I didn't do any of that. I mean, I encouraged her, I talked to her, but she's the one who said, I'm going to start reading the Bible, and just decided to take God's side against herself, you know? And so, and there's some patients that don't want to hear about it. They just want their blood pressure checked. And so I respect that. I mean, I try to be kind. I try to be light. They know why we're there. You know, they know why the heart behind it. And so sometimes I'm just being kind and showing the love of Christ through being kind. The second part of our mission statement says to proclaim and demonstrate the love of Christ. In the gospel, it said when Jesus showed the full extent of his love, he took off his outer garments, wrapped a towel around himself, and washed his disciples' feet. So sometimes when they don't want to hear proclaimed, we just maybe take the socks off a homeless guy and look at their feet. I think that's demonstrating the love of Christ. It was St. Francis of Assisi that said, preach, 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 and when you have to use words. Now, we want to use words, but we want actions to be seen as well. So I don't know. I mean, I think we try to listen to the Spirit. And I tell my staff all the time, this isn't the Grant Scarborough show here. Like, people hearing the gospel need to start at the front desk. That first smile, the first way you talk to folks. Like, if we all do little points of touching folks in the name of Christ, then who cares who gets the blessing? I mean, let's just give it away and let God do what he does. So it is important, though, because you do have to fight for your culture. And I really think from a business mindset, the best thing I can do in the process of trying to set this up is fight for our culture. And so my staff laughs at me all the time because I literally go around all day long and pat people on the back and go, hey, you're doing a great job today. You're doing a great job today. You're doing a great job today. Like, I'm always trying to encourage it because I told them yesterday in our family meeting, I said, there were nowhere Christians by our love for one another. So if we don't love each other, our patients are going to see that. And our ministry will be less. We must be quick to love and quick to forgive and slow to anger. Like, we must treat each other that way because if we don't, the gospel won't be seen. And that's, from a business-minded side, like when I'm telling folks start clinics, the culture is one of the most important things, and you always have to be fighting for it, or it's just slowly going to, go off the rails a little bit.
You sound like part coach, part doctor.
I get excited about these things. I get excited, but I do. Like we help some other clinics a little bit, yeah. And I like that. Like I like them to come along other clinics and help them and talk about kind of what they need and coach them up a little bit. And so we're doing a little coaching.
So MercyMed is having this incredible impact locally. I'm sure there are people who come in from other places that want to model, want to see, want to mimic, or maybe mimic's the wrong word because that somehow implies that they would not be doing something that was right, but that want to model after what you're doing. How do you help others?
Yeah.
And is there any vision that God has given you about whether MercyMed expands beyond the environment you're in today?
So there are a lot of clinics out there doing some really neat things. There's an organization called Christian Community Health Fellowship, CCHF. If you Google that, you'll get Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. That's not the right one. It's the one after that, Christian Community Health Fellowship. And so they actually have a conference every year. They have one in April, and I'm actually speaking at it, so it's going to be kind of fun to speak at that. But if you are a physician or a doctor and you're interested in caring for the poor, that's a great place to start. Is go to CCHF website. They have clinics all around the U.S., and you can maybe plug in someplace locally where you are. I've started two, and so they're kind of aware of that. So sometimes if it's near this area and someone reaches out to CCHF, they'll tell them to call me, and then we'll help. So right now we're working with a group out of Tampa. They're trying to start a clinic like ours, and we love plagiarism. We think it's awesome. So when we started our clinic in Augusta, we literally stole everything they did in Memphis and just put our name on it, and they were fine with it. When I went to Columbus, we did the same thing, stole everything from Augusta. So I pretty much sent everything down to Tampa. They're going to call themselves MercyMed of Tampa.
Are they really?
And instead of being red, they chose green, and my wife said, you should have chosen green. It's much better than red. So she likes their colors better. We have some of their swag now. But, they're working on their building now, doing a little more fundraising, and hopefully opening in about 5 or 6 months to start seeing the poor down there. And so we've been coaching them and helping them, and it's been a lot of fun to watch that grassroots movement go up to getting where it's about to start a clinic. So yeah, my dream, if you're asking my dream, which I guess you did, is I want to make this replicable. And the reason people don't do it most of the time, it's a financial issue. Um, I tell folks the two bottlenecks of what I do. One is finding mission-minded doctors. I am the best paid missionary maybe in the U.S. I'm a well-paid missionary. I'm loaded. I'm also the poorest paid doctor in Columbus, Georgia.
Striking the balance there between those two,
That's
right?
And that's okay. I mean, I feel called to be a missionary. And to make this work, I have to find mission-minded doctors saying, you know what? I'm willing to take a little bit less so I can bless a lot of folks in this area. And the kingdom of God is huge. Like, we need Christian doctors teaching med students. We need Christian doctors to the wealthy. We need Christian doctors everywhere. I'm just looking for Christian doctors willing to serve the poor, and we just get paid a little bit less. And so one of the biggest bottlenecks is finding providers willing to take a little bit less to care for the poor. And so that's one issue. The other issue is the financial issue. We bring in about 45% of our budget through medical reimbursement, which is amazing to think our patients chip in 45%. Mm-hmm. That's really cool to think about. And the community takes care of the 55%. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how do you make this replicable? So if they might have a clinic, I don't know. We'll just say Valdosta calls and says, we put a clinic here. And so that's kind of what I've been dreaming about a little bit is what are the big things we must overcome? And the reality is probably the physician, finding the right one. And the second is financial. And so we're starting our clinic doing some research, just started this. We can make a little money in research. And the hope is if we can figure out how to do this, get it fine-tuned, that we can bring in $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year doing research to offset some of the costs of doing the clinic.
Oh, wow.
And so, we're doctors, and so we're trying to start thinking, what happens if we start an urgent care? What happens if we start an imaging center or a research center? And can we build a model out or an infusion center to say, Tampa, you want a clinic? Great, let's help. What we want you to do is you need to get your committee ready. When you find this doctor, we set it up. You need to raise this much money. Year 2, we want to put a research center there to help offset the costs. Mm-hmm. The reason there's a Habitat for Humanity in every city is they just figured the process out and figure out how to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And so I would love to try to figure out that model to overcome the obstacles of, and there's some great residency programs that we're going to speak to every year now, recruiting doctors, that if we could start that pipeline of physicians to figure out what's that urgent care or what's that, research look like. So we can say, Valdosta, great, here's the clinic, it'll cost this much, but then we'll come in at a research center and just help offset it with the money coming in this way so you can build it out. So that would be my dream, is trying to figure out what that look like so that we can have a model we could take to whatever kind of city really wants to have it.
That sounds amazing.
It does. Sounds a little scary. I'm a doctor. And so some skill set I feel really good about, but I feel like I'm getting stretched a little bit thinking, how do I do that there? And so it's fun to dream about.
But as I listen to your story, it sounds like you've been stretched quite a few times. You didn't want to go to medical school.
Well, there's a limit. There's a limit, God. Come on,
Not for somebody like you. Not for somebody like you. Okay, so I promised our audience that we'd go back to the farm because I just love the idea of farming and the whole thing. The idea that people got to eat 3 times a day. We know in these underserved communities that food quality and food capability of people getting the right foods is more difficult than ever. Mm-hmm. And yet y'all have this magnificent farm right on 2nd Avenue that everybody gets to drive by. It's not hidden back behind in some community. It's right there. And it brings attention to the need for real food. I mean, talk a little bit about how that's impacting people's health and about their lives.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Every time we do something, I feel like we learned another obstacle. A lot of my friends who live in the poor communities have always seen their moms just go to the gas station every day and bring back some canned foods. And so to have fresh fruits and vegetables in a community, some folks don't know what to do with it. I've seen people look at squash and say, what is this? Some of our friends don't have refrigeration. So what do you do with this? Some of our friends don't have power, so they don't have a stove. So how do you overcome that? And so some of that is saying, wow, we can bring fresh fruits and vegetables, but how do we overcome the other next issue? So the first thing is typical, it's expensive. And there's a great grant in Columbus called, I think it's called Wholesome Waves. I think that's it. There might be, forgive me, Wholesome Waves, if I'm wrong. I think it's what it's called. Well, they'll match your food stamps. So if you come in for $20 worth of EBT, you can get $40 worth of fruits and vegetables.
Oh, very cool.
And the farmer will get paid the other $20 out of the grant. So also now the farmer gets its full share. The friends of ours get their at half price, and now they have fresh fruits and vegetables. And also it's in the community where they can walk to, pick it up, and walk home.
Mm.
So the next thing we did after that is that we started a Cooking Matters class, because we had to teach some of our friends of how to use certain vegetables. Not all of them, but we started a 6-week course where we teach them how to cook fresh fruits and vegetables the first 5 weeks. And the 4th week, we give them a $10 gift card, and we go to Walmart, and they pick out a dinner for 4 that has all the food groups in it for $10, and they go home and they cook it themselves. Mm. And so we showed them how to go through the grocery store, what to look for. And they used to get eggs. They don't get eggs anymore. It's too expensive. Eggs is gone. Forget eggs. But they get for $10 a family of 4 a meal, and they go home and be able to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. And I'll tell you something else. These classes we've done, COVID caused more poverty than we realize in a certain area. Like when we think of poverty, we always think of poverty of money. Mm-hmm. There's also a poverty of relationships. And I cannot tell you, my friends living in poverty during COVID, everything closed down. So many of them became isolated and lonely. Oh, yeah. And now you bring them out and put them in groups together and let them go through, we have a yoga class, let them go through a 5 weeks of fitness, let them go through Cooking Matters. Like that community built there is probably any medicine that I've ever given, is to them having that community and realize that they're not alone. They have relationships. It is so powerful for them to kind of regain those relationships. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of some of the story of the food.
All right. So we've covered Grant the physician, Grant the friend, Grant the man of Christ, but there's also the doctor husband and the doctor father, 5 important women in your life, right?
That's right.
So talk to me for a minute about what has this meant to your family? Mm-hmm. And how has your family changed, you think, because of your ministry and because of what you do?
That's a great question. By the way, no offense to anybody out there, but I do have the best daughters in the world. Just figured I'd do a shout out to them. I got an amazing wife. I got 4 wonderful daughters. I love them so much. So that's a good question. I kind of want to go ask them that now you asked that question. But I think some of what they've seen is that they've seen a little bit of the sacrifice. They've seen a little bit of the hard work. My wife thinks I work harder now than I did in residency program because we're working so hard to build this and grow this and do that. But I think they've seen in life it's worth giving your life away to something greater than yourself. That there's worth investing in other people. The gospel is not just love Christ in your closet. It's walk outside and meet your neighbors and love your neighbors. And so I think they've got to see that. I've tried to bring them along as much as I can in ministry. It's like easier when they're younger, a little more difficult when they're older. But sometimes I did Bible studies at the clinic and they'd come with me to the Bible studies. And sometimes I'd take them to, I'd go visit people in their house. I went to visit this man who was not very healthy, not doing very well. And I took my second daughter and we go in the house and he has bad lungs and he's laying on his bed with a sheet covering most of the vital organs, but not all of them. So I walked in and tried to cover him up as I'm walking in with my young daughter, and he's, smoking on oxygen. Not a good combination for fire and oxygen next to each other.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And we will go in. There's probably 5 or 6 roaches that scatter as we walk through the door. But she got to go there with me, and she got to go there and see me kind of talk to him and touch him and care for him and live that out. When she was younger, we went to hospital rounds with me one time, and I had a person there who was passing away, and I told her, she played the violin. I said, I need to bring the violin with you. And we went up to the hospital to someone who was lonely, who had no friends, no family, no one visiting. And my 10-year-old daughter was playing violin for him in the hospital. And then we go to church after that, and it's always prayer, because she always write a prayer, pray for school, pray for this, pray for this. But this day she said, pray for this guy, and wrote his name down. He's lonely and he's sick. Wow. Like what an impact for a 10-year-old to be able to experience and encounter that. But they at the same time keep my heart young and fresh and challenge me with things as well. And so I don't know, love your kids a lot, hug them, kiss them, pray for them, call them all the time. Um, my dad would say, when he thinks about family, he said the hardest part of my day is not getting up at early in the morning, going to work or working. It's pulling into my driveway after you worked all day and sitting there going, all right, Lord, I need my best energy of the day right now, right before I walk through that door. And it's just a great way to think of, you know what? I need that best energy. I'm about to walk in here and see my wife and kids. I haven't seen them all day. I got to give them the best. And I think about it sometimes on the way I'm going, all right, Lord, I'm tired. But I need a little bit more energy tonight to finish off strong. So, I don't know. Those are kind of the thoughts.
I truly admire that. I will tell you on a funny side note, I had a friend with 3 daughters who told me that once in a blue moon, he'd pull in the driveway and just feel the tension and pull back out and go get a Dairy Queen Blizzard and come back in 30 minutes later.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, but I think it's so admirable, the father you've been to your girls, and to be able to share this with them, because I think some people wouldn't show that part of the world to them, and yet you embrace it, love it, and make these people not only feel loved, but live by the example of who you are in front of them.
Well, and I intentionally call them not patients, my friends, like especially when I'm talking on podcasts like this, because they are. I mean, I saw a guy today that I've been seeing his whole family for a long time, and their family's not the best picture. It's a bad picture of poverty. And today he told me, hey, Doc, just want you to know I've been praying for you every day. Oh. And I'm just like, I can't, you're praying for. So sometimes you think, man, Grant, you're giving your life away. But the reality is, when you give your life away, you get blessed more than you give it away. I think I have more folks praying for me now than I ever would have if I had a regular doctor clinic. And the folks praying for me are probably some of the poorest in the city. And I think God hears their prayers probably more than he hears my prayers. And I love it. And so that's that deal. Like the verse is, I mean, the quote from When Helping Hurts, you know, you don't realize that you're just as broken as the person you're trying to help. And when you realize you go in, you're on the same level ground and you both need Jesus. I mean, our sins are different. Like my sin is comfort and, you know, I have everything I need and I'm relying on myself and pride and other stuff. And their sin is different, but it's still just sin. Mm-hmm. And we still need the same Savior. And that's where we rally upon. Like we rally with Christ. Mm-hmm. So.
Grant, thank you.
No, man, it's a pleasure. A lot of fun.
We appreciate you more than you can imagine. So one last thought, because you do something that gives back to the community, we'll ask for your plug. And how do people find out more about MercyMed?
Yeah, they just come to our website at www.mercymedcolumbus.com. I actually wrote a book a few years later, just a lot of different patient encounters. And it kind of really tells a lot of the story of what it's like to love others, but really most of the book's about my brokenness and how poorly I do it and how I look at my friends with much less and admire them of their courage and their strength. I mean, for some of my friends to come out of poverty, it takes so much strength, so much courage. Like you just have to sit back and admire that. And so yeah, go to our website, come by. We'll give you a little tour. We'll take you out to the garden, let you pull up a carrot. And then just encourage you to, I'd love for you, man. Look at what we did. I mean, I think that'd be great. But then you go to your own neighborhood and find folks and walk out the door and love your neighbor. That's what I want them to do.
You know, to our audience, I'd just step back for this moment and say, no matter what you do, you have a chance to impact the kingdom. You have a chance to grow the kingdom. You have a chance to love somebody else in the name of Jesus. And Grant, you've done that. Yeah. You've done that here in our community and for a part of our community that so desperately needed it. We thank you for that. And you've been a real blessing.
Yeah. Can I read a verse real quick?
Please.
This verse basically says, Christ has reconciled us to himself, which is amazing to think about, and then given us a ministry of reconciliation. Like he says, now you go. And this is what it says, that Paul's writing says, the ministry of reconciliation, that is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us, to me and you, the ministry of reconciliation. Therefore, we're ambassadors for Christ. God making his appeal through us. Like, do you realize how amazing that is? Like, God says, Paul, I'm going to make my appeal through you. And that's the challenge for us. It's just to say, all right, Lord, yes. Like, I don't know what that looks like. I'm going to do it poorly, but I'm going to believe this and say, I'm just going to step out in faith and say, all right, Lord, make your appeal through us. We're going to be your ambassadors, and sit back and say, do what you do, God. And just realize that you're one of 1,000 touches someone needs to come to Christ. And you might be the last or the first, but like, he wants to use us. And I think we can step into that.
To our audience, I think you can totally see why I was so excited about today and what Grant is doing and the impact he's had to our community. And frankly, the impact he's had and the ripple effect he's had on so many other lives. Because while he talks about the community he's touched, he's also touched other doctors and nurses and volunteers and people that then take the energy that MercyMed builds and pass it along to so many others. It is just something so positive. So I would encourage you to pray for them and to be inspired by what they're doing in a world of medicine that isn't always thought of as being close to God, but yet here it is speaking God's word and giving people eternal life. So to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, your attention, and we encourage you to go to theredeem.com, sign up for our newsletter, which really gives you access to all the things that we're doing, from podcasts to small groups, including online groups. Just get engaged, and we thank you for what you do. Good night, and God bless.